everyone, welcome back to the show. Today we have a guest coming to you all the way from Germany. His name is Chris Kaiser and he's the founder of Click a Tree, which is a company that helps individuals plant trees and fight climate change from the comfort of their screens. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Hi Bianca, hello everybody.
Nice to chat with you today. I was reading through the introduction on your website and how your love of elephants played a little bit of a role in this organization. So I would love to hear a little bit about that and about the whole idea behind Click a Tree.
Sure, yeah, it was, as you said, the elephants that stole my heart. In 2012, I got the unique opportunity to move to Thailand and work in very close contact with elephants there. And I'd never done it before, so I had no idea what would expect me, but they are magnificent creatures. And it wasn't before long, like I had signed up, I think, for a 6-month internship or something, and I ended up staying for 5 years because it was such a captivating place. And yeah, I mean, if you work with elephants day in, day out, you know, you don't have a chance but to just fall in love with them. And unfortunately, also, you have to start dealing with all their problems. And the main issue for Asian elephants especially is the loss of habitat, because there's agriculture, there's infrastructure, there's climate change, and all these forces, they tuck away on the forests that you have in Southeast Asia. And that again results in the loss of habitat for the elephants. So that's when the desire came up to start planting trees. I mean, it's not that you have to reinvent the wheel, you know, people have done it before. The main challenge was to get funds, and I didn't want to go down this NGO route saying, hey, can you please give me a few dollars and stuff. And it's a noble cause, but I think it's easier to just implement it into our certain everyday processes. So what we did first is we launched a travel tool called Be and Tree, which was essentially a cooperation with the world's biggest booking platforms like Expedia, TripAdvisor, Skyscanner, you name it. And I agreed with them for every booking we referred to them, they send us a marketing commission, and we invest that money into planting trees, which was super simple because for a traveler, it would be 1 extra mouse click. It didn't cost anything extra because it was paid from the marketing budgets of the partners. They said instead of throwing the money into TV ads or Google ads or something, we invested into this cause and we could start planting trees. Yeah. So that's how things got going, and they developed upward from there.
Yeah, amazing. It's an interesting, so is it a social enterprise in the end, or is it a business?
It's a business, but well, everything we do is with a social cause. I mean, the main priority we put is that all our workers on the ground, that they get a fair salary. I wouldn't want to work with volunteers or gap year students or something. It's great if you invest your time to volunteer for something, but you do it for a certain amount of time. And especially when it's about planting trees, we have to plant years and even decades in advance. And that only works if the people on site get a fair salary. So that's why, yeah, we chose to go into the business route, also because we want to bring this whole charitable work out of this charity niche. We want to make it mainstream business to ensure that maybe other people follow our path and say, oh, look, this guy is running a proper business, but he's doing good with doing it. Maybe I should do the same. So,
it was
that's the idea.
I loved in your bio where you wrote that your vision is to melt capitalistic values and charitable work together. I think it's so important because so many businesses in the not-for-profit space or in the social impact space and environmental impact space, you know, like our hearts are in it not for the money, but you know, you do need to drive profit to be able to, like you said, employ people, and you know, it's quite important. So when you let's sort of go back a bit to when you first started the organization. So you went to Thailand in 2012, spent was for 5 years there, and then during that time was it always this idea to plant trees, or were you sort of looking at other different avenues? Where did the whole idea come about?
For the first 2 years, I was just entirely into my work there. I didn't have any troubles or issues because where I worked, we did have enough forest. You know, it was in the middle of a national park and it was green enough. So for the beginning, I wasn't too concerned with anything outside that area. And then, yeah, step by step, you know, whenever you would talk with, say, travel agents or other people from other areas of the country or something, you would learn about all these issues and about the increasing human-elephant conflict. That elephants don't have anywhere to live, so they move towards human settlements and they start eating the crops from the local farmers. And you can't blame the farmers, you know, I mean, they just want to provide for their families and they need to protect their crops, of course. So they come out with the shotgun or something, and usually the elephant loses that battle. So it was a very long process. It wasn't that I woke up the one morning and said, "Oh yes, I'm going to plant trees now. Let's save the planet," you know. So it was more like a gradual thing. In between, I had some other business ideas on the internet. Doing some marketing courses. I was getting a little bit into this digital nomad scene back then, and only out of that, after a while, I realized, gosh, there's so many opportunities to earn money online or to make money online, but there's so much need to do good. Why don't we just combine these two forces and make sure that, yeah, we use the internet to collect the money to then do good for the real world, so to say.
Yeah, and it sounds like you managed to develop relationships with some pretty big partners like Expedia and things like that. That must have been a huge win for your business at the time.
Oh, big time, yeah. Especially when you're a small player, you know, and you knock on the big guy's door, then it's difficult to talk with the right person in the first instance, because quite often the first assistant would try to fend you off. But I thought, you know, when I have the first big partners on board, then all the others will follow lead, because if I can claim I'm working with Expedia, everybody will believe I'm trustworthy. Whether I am or not is a completely different story. But as soon as I can put their logo on my website, then all the others will be like, oh, well, if Expedia trusts this guy, then he must be somewhat credible. And that's how it worked. But the first partner was Booking.com. Mm-hmm. And they are quite big in Central Europe, but also globally, I guess they're known. And yeah, that's why I first tapped on the big guys' doors, and it actually worked, because I gave them this proposition where they wouldn't lose anything. I told them, look, you only pay me a small commission whenever I send you clients. So if I wouldn't send them any clients, they don't have to pay me any money. There was no contract or obligation or whatever. So it was all up to me to do the marketing for them, basically. And of course, they're happy to pay for that. So that's how it got started. Yeah.
Yeah, nice. And what sort of achievements what have been some of your biggest achievements for Click a Tree since foundation?
Oh, there's many of them. Yeah, you should have seen me celebrating the day I signed up Booking.com. You know, it was like, yes, I made it. I saved the world single-handedly. Until then, a month later, I realized nobody knew about the corporation and nobody was using the booking link. And then the hard work actually started to promote that link. But that was definitely a good day. Then half a year later, I got accepted into a mentoring program with European and Eastern African entrepreneurs, which pushed me forward years, I think, because you have such amazing mentors on that program. The one man is still with me, and he's actually now joining the company because he's been mentoring me for 2 years, basically. And he's like, hey, Chris, if you haven't given up after 2 years, now I trust you. So now I joined your company. I'm like, yes, I can always need good people on my team. That was definitely good. And there's tons of milestones, you know. In the beginning, it's basically the first tree you plant that you celebrate as if you had saved the planet. Then we crossed the milestone of 100,000 trees, which was, of course, also, oh, wow, I think now we're someone. And next month we're going to restructure the company into a GmbH, which is a limited liability, I think, in sort of in Australia. And that's going to be another big step. In April, I hired my first team member. So, there's many exciting things.
Only this April recently.
Yes, exactly. Before I always worked with freelancers, to be flexible, and I wasn't really settled. So I had my team. Some are now even still in Australia. Some was in Japan, some others in the United States. So it was all across the globe and working in 8 different time zones sort of thing. But now we're pulling it a little bit together in Germany and trying to focus on one time zone the most. But I think one of the coolest moments was really going to Ghana last November and talking to these people, whose lives you impact so much by not even knowing them, but because we provide jobs for them and give them stable incomes, and then seeing the gratitude in their eyes, and it was like this cliche movie when in the evening, someone would start a bonfire, there's sparkling stars all across the sky, and then you sit there, you talk, someone suddenly pulls up a drum, starts drumming a little, someone starts singing, then one after the other, you get up and dance around the campfire, It was sensational. It was so, so cool.
Wow. And so your first pilot project was in Thailand. Is that where you developed the model? I'd like to talk more about the model for people that sort of might not know about how it works. So you work with, you find local organizations and then sort of work with them in their own tree planting programs. How does it work?
Yes, pretty much. I mean, there are some big companies around the globe that already have huge reforestation projects, but I always think the challenge for them is, of course, to keep the prices very competitive, which results in a potentially less good pay for the workers on site. So we prefer to work with the smaller companies or even individual communities or something where we're the only ones who plant trees with them, sort of thing. And then we can run the project the way we think is fair. So we make sure that they all get fair pay, but also on the other hand, that they can provide reporting, which is up to European standards, sort of thing, and that they create marketing material like good pictures that we can forward to our partners, and they can promote what they're doing, because without our partners, of course, we wouldn't exist. So we need to make sure that they get enough material that they can promote themselves. And sourcing these communities or these planting partners is the main challenge, because there's millions of people claiming to plant trees for you, but if you can't be on site all the time, it's a different challenge. And of course, if you plant 100,000 trees, you can't just go there once a year and start counting them out. That's just not how it works. So you need to make sure that you really find super trustworthy partners who also understand your long-term ambitions, who don't just think, oh, in 2 years' time, I could make more money by planting tobacco on this field or something, but to understand that by planting a proper forest, they actually make money for years and years and decades even to come, and that the future generations, their kids and their grandchildren, will profit from what they're doing now. And once we find these people, that's when we dive into business. Yeah.
Interesting. I never knew there would be a business of planting trees. I mean, it's fantastic because we need more trees. So I'm an individual. I live in a remote community. You come through and say, let's partner on this tree planting program together. How does that benefit me as the community member? Like you were mentioning that it can have benefits for decades to come. How would that work?
Yes. Well, the thing is, because the vision behind Click a Tree is to plant habitat for elephants, right? We're not looking to plant trees. We're looking to plant forests, like self-sustaining ecosystems. And for that, it doesn't help us if you plant 10,000 trees in a row and make it a monoculture and say, yeah, we planted 10,000 trees, we're done. We need to make it a super diverse forest. So you need dozens of different tree species. You need to make a plan. How do you work them together? How, like in which symbiosis would they work the best? how many of which tree species do you need to make the most sense of this thing. And that's why we also need to make sure that the farmers don't just go in 5 years later and chop things down. So that's why we pay them continuously to maintain the forest. It's not just please drop a seed in the ground and run away. It's more like, so you nurse the tree or the seed in the tree nursery for 3 to 6 months, then it grows to like a few centimeters, a few dozen centimeters, then you put it out into the field and you continue to nurse it for at least 3 years. But even after that, usually in our teams, the people go into the forest, they prune the forest here and there if needed. They make sure that it actually is a forest and that it's a healthy forest and a surviving forest. And all of that we finance. So you really profit in the long term. And then ideally, we build something extra, like in Ghana, for example, we created this entrepreneurship school where unemployed young people learn how to create a better future for themselves. And all of that is financed by the tree planting project. So that way, also the young generations, they understand best what's missing in their community. It's not about the white man going in and say, hey, you should be producing clothes or something. It's about them realizing, I think in my community, the biggest lack is of farming equipment or something. And then in this entrepreneurship school, we enable them, how do you write a business plan? What is financing and budgeting? How do you do marketing and all these things? And that way they can help themselves to help their communities. And I think that is the beauty of the long-term benefits.
I think so. And I think, we're talking about something which is truly sustainable. Lately, I've been quite concerned about how the loss of tourism has impacted so many remote communities, because here you are relying on sustainable development in an industry that in a month almost disappeared. And so yes, you're left with all these communities that are relying on this income, and it's really refreshing to hear you talk about something such as this, which could really be a sustainable. I wouldn't say that in the near future, all of a sudden, the idea of planting trees is not going to be a thing. So I think that definitely the model is something that could impact communities in the future. And how do you feel about sort of scaling at this point in time? So you're working in Thailand, you're working in Ghana. How have those projects gone, and do you have ambitions to sort of take this model into other areas?
We're always keen to scale, of course. Our main concern at the moment is, of course, finding new partners who are willing to invest firsthand, because the mistake we made in the past is that we focused too much on tourism. Because I've been working in tourism for over 10 years and it always worked super well. And even while working in Thailand, you would have a bomb go off in Bangkok or something, and then all the tourists would fly to southern Thailand or northern Thailand. But they always traveled. I was too narrow-minded to understand there could be this virus which just kills entire tourism globally for 6 months or something. It's something I had never thought of.
I don't think any of us could have thought of that. I mean, here we were thinking that we had this, like I said, sustainable development model. To have predicted that tourism would just be brought to a halt, no one was thinking about that.
And that's the thing, you would have this tsunami freak wave in Thailand in 2004, and then tourism stops for like 3 months, and the people rather travel to Vietnam or Indonesia or something. But I thought if I have Expedia as partner, it doesn't matter to me where the people fly on holidays. So also for the last few months we got hit quite a bit, unfortunately. But now we found a lot of interesting new partners in the gastronomy sector, for example, mobility sector, in the fashion industry, who are all keen to help improve our planet. And once all these connections are stabilized and moving upward, and we plant more trees with them, we of course also will look for new planting sites and planting projects. Because we understand that, for example, if an Australian business would like to join our initiative, they would most likely be most keen to plant trees in Australia. and you guys need them as dearly as every other, or well, more dearly than most other countries, I'd say, after your crazy fires last year and stuff. It's desperately time that we reforest Australia as well. And once we find a reliable team who's also capable of working to our requirements, then sure, we're more than happy to expand operations anywhere in the world.
Yeah, it's an interesting point, bringing up Australia and the need for reforestation. I think the bushfires was a huge hit for us, but we're still dealing with issues of deforestation, even post bushfires. I know that there are some old growth forests at risk in Tasmania, and there's a beautiful project called the Tree Projects that are photographing the trees down there and trying to raise awareness. And it's, yeah, you've got this battle between planting more trees, cutting down trees, planting more trees, and I think often it goes so under the radar about like how horrific the deforestation is in our world. And so to be able to kind of hear about how these smaller communities and also the potential to maybe come to Australia is fantastic.
No, well, it's a very good point you mentioned there. I think the first thing that we people need to understand is that planting trees is no substitute for cutting trees down. As you say, this old growth forest in Tasmania, if you would chop it down and then just plant another few thousand trees there and say, oh, well, we reforested it, it's fine. It's just not the same because all the flora is just dead and the fauna is gone, So, the first step must always be to protect what's there. And then the second step is to reforest what is gone already.
Mm. And how long does it take to plant a forest? I mean, will you see these forests in our lifetime?
Definitely, yeah. The beauty is, especially with the forest, the first few years are the most exciting. Once the forest is like 100 years old, you don't see that much change anymore. It still changes, of course, but very slowly. So the first few months, when you have like this tiny seed and there's basically nothing there, and you put it into this little pot in your tree nursery, and then it grows within months to like say 30 centimeters or something. That's the most exciting time. And then you put it out in the field, and that's also why we have to nurse the trees for at least 3 years, because that's how long they take to properly settle roots and to adapt to their environment and then to sustain themselves. But there are other trees, like in Ghana, for example, we grow baobab trees. They're amongst the oldest trees in the world. They grow up to, I think, 3,000 years or something. And that also means that they start growing a lot slower. So we need to nurse them for at least 12 years until they can sustain themselves, sort of thing. But then they basically be a legacy forever, sort of thing. It's amazing. And just thinking about, my grandkids will walk to the forest and be like, oh, my granddad planted this. That would be so cool.
That's so sweet. Unless, of course, a herd of elephants that need to eat 300 kilograms of food a day just come in and decide to munch on them. But the trees won't be gone, just the leaves.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's the beauty of nature. The elephants munch the leaves, and then the trees grow new leaves, and then the elephants can come back and eat some more. So if you would leave nature alone, it'll be perfectly fine.
I actually spent 2 weeks in northern Thailand with a project called the Kindred Spirit Elephant Sanctuary last year, doing citizen science research in a beautiful little town. And yeah, I interviewed that woman on my podcast last season, talking about where, the plight of elephants in tourism, and how if they're not working in tourism, where do they go? Because as you said, their habitat is lost. They can no longer just roam around because of human animal conflict. And that was a really interesting conversation, and they're a really good project. But I know now, especially with tourism lost, a lot of these elephants are just kind of hanging around, and there needs to be they have needed to raise money to pay for the food for these elephants. So they've got a pretty tough ride at the moment, those elephants.
It is super sad to see, and it's just not their fault. I always think if they were at fault, you could say, yeah, well, you just made a wrong decision, your fault. But it's definitely not their fault, and it's it's so challenging, you know, as you also say, if they weren't in tourism, what would they do? And that's often the challenge we have when we think of new solutions sort of thing, when we're like, hey, elephant tourism is bad at all. It doesn't work that way. You can't just, I think they have about 3,000 elephants in tourism just in Thailand alone at the moment. You can't just set them all free and see what happens, you know, that doesn't work. So you need to find a way to make elephant tourism more sustainable somehow, and maybe stop the riding at least and turn them more into sanctuary-like places. But it's not always just black and white. There's at least 50 shades of gray in between. So,
I know and it was really nice to raise awareness about that too, around not just being able to take elephants out of tourism and just put them somewhere, because, and why we're having this conversation, deforestation.
yes.
I'm interested to talk about the education piece for local people. So obviously you're coming in, you're sort of saying, hey, let's work together on this tree planting project. Do you find that the local communities do see the value of planting trees, or is there an education piece around that for them in helping them to understand how important it is to maintain forests and to plant trees?
It surely depends on the community. It's difficult to generalize that, but most of the time, it depends on the area as well, you know, because if you go to, say, central Ghana and tell people, look, we need to plant trees because climate change is happening, they all look at you and go like, what? And the thing is, if everybody would have an ecological footprint like a central Ghanaian person, we wouldn't have climate change. You know, it's not their fault. They certainly didn't do it. And then explaining to them why it is important and why the rest of the planet is concerned takes some time, of course. And then there's always the difference between the people who are still after the short-term profit, who are like, hey, I just use my land to grow tobacco and I have 2 years, a lot of money, but who don't understand that after those 2 years, their land will be ruined for the next decades because they use so many pesticides on growing the tobacco that they just won't be able to use any of that land for the next 2 generations or something. And then there are other people who most of the time have made this experience already, who are sitting on a lot of land which their grandparents ruined, sort of thing, and who are now very open to the idea to say, well, I have children myself and I would love them to have a better or stable income than I had. What can we do? And if you explain to them, look, I'm going to pay you money to plant and nurse trees for me. Not all of them necessarily understand why a white man would do that, but as long as they receive a fair, stable income for it, they're more than willing to listen to the proposition at least. And you explain to them, and most of them are very keen to then take the project on. I mean, they're not stupid people or something. They're very clever most of the time. They just have a very different educational background, and they don't usually read the news or something about climate change or something because they're concerned with other things in their community. And then if you go in and explain to them how things are going to work and how this will provide for them and their kids and their grandchildren, they're usually quite keen. And the beauty is that way we can tap into the local knowledge, because I can't go in and say, oh, we're in central Ghana now. I planted these trees in northern Thailand. I think we should do the same here. It's a completely different playground. So it's great to have the locals on your side and then work with them and say, hey, you know your land the best. What sort of trees did your parents grow? What's that tree over there? Can we make a mix out of all these, you know, and create a forest that works for your area? And then they also, of course, happy that they get involved in this thing, and that it's not the white man coming and telling them what to do, but it's basically me inspiring them to develop a project on their own and then financing it. And that's also an important part of the philosophy. That's also why, for example, we don't own the land. I wouldn't want to be the guy coming in, buying the land and then telling the people what to do with it. It's more like, this is your land, you can do with it whatever you want, but how about this idea? I would be happy to make this possible with you, and this is how it would work, and this is how it has worked for other communities. And then they remain in ownership of everything and in control of everything, and we empower them to create a better lifestyle for themselves. And that's the beauty of running your own reforestation project. I can do it the way I want and the way I think it's right, you know. And I always think the right thing is if everyone profits, especially the people on the ground. And that's usually why also we overpay them, because in my head, I want to make tree planting a cool job. It shouldn't be like, oh, look at John, he's planting trees because he's too stupid to do anything else. It should be more like, oh, wow, look at John. Like all his kids have brand new school uniforms and he's now riding to work on a bicycle. And look at this guy. What is he doing for a living? Oh, he's planting trees. Oh, I want to do that too. Yeah. Can I get a job in tree planting, please? And that way you inspire people to do the same, you know. And if everybody wants to plant trees, then we have won a lot.
I mean, if I was getting paid to plant trees, I'd be a very happy woman. No, I think that's really beautiful. I think, you know, when it comes to development, the collaborative effort is so important. And yeah, it seems like through the work that you've been doing with these communities, you're starting to see the benefits. So I think it's great. And just a little bit more back to the Entrepreneur Program. How is that going, and are you going to foresee that maybe you'll open that up into other communities that you work with as well?
What entrepreneur? Oh, you mean the building of the entrepreneurship school?
Yeah.
Yeah, generally more than happy to, if the community thinks that could benefit them. If they say, look, there's a high unemployment rate, or the youth here is too uninspired, or all the young people just move to the big city because they don't know what to do with their lives, then that's certainly something we can help establish. And then we always start with, you know, the easiest way possible. So maybe the entrepreneurship course is just 1 year long or something, and you learn the basics, and then you see what comes out of it. And if you have inspired young people afterwards who say, well, I have this great idea and this beautiful dream and I want to make it reality, I just need another 6 months of coaching to get there or something. And sure, no problem at all, you know, give him some more coaching, some more training. If we can, we'd also happily give him a job. I mean, in Ghana, we now had this guy who wants to become a photographer. And now once our funds are back up, I would love to send him to another photography school and then employ him, you know, and take pictures of all the reforestation efforts that are happening. And that way you have a perfectly round circle of a working economy. And if that could benefit other communities as well, sure, of course, yeah, more than happy to do that.
Yeah, beautiful. And so what's the next milestone for you? It seems in such a short time you've achieved so much. What's on the agenda?
Always a lot, yeah. Saving the planet sort of thing, and then we move on to the moon. So oh, well, officially we had planned to plant 1 million trees this year. Thanks to Corona, we're way behind schedule and won't achieve that. So the milestone is 1 million trees for next year. And then we'll see where life leads us. I mean, that's such a huge number, you know. It's very hard to imagine what you could do if you had planted 1 million trees. And then we always have this mindset, we want to bring sustainability into your everyday life. So now in Germany, we rolled out a program called Food for Future, where we work with all the gastronomy sector and have them plant trees on a win-win cooperation level as well. And that takes off amazingly at the moment, even though a lot of the gastronomy here is struggling after Corona as well, but they're so keen to do something. And because we gave them this super simple solution, they're like, oh yes, I'm so in and I can't lose, you know, I don't have any risk. Let me help you save the world. And that is also something we could look at rolling out globally if it's successful here. So let's see how things progress. There's always tons of ideas, you know, you need to just sort your mind somehow and then focus on one and not just try to be everywhere at the same time.
Well, I think you're on the right track. I think it's really impressive how you've found a way, like you said, to make it easy for these corporations, businesses to make a difference. I think often, you know, people really want to help, but they don't know how. And so it's around, okay, how do we just make this easy for somebody? How do we make this easy so they just need to click something? And so I have no doubt that there was a lot of manpower and a lot of brains behind being able to achieve that. But what you're doing at the moment is fantastic. So how can our listeners or anyone watching this video support what you do, find out more about what you do, and save the world too? And then the
moon. Yes, we have another one converted.
I'm converted.
Well, the easiest way is, of course, go to the website, clickatree.com, and take a look around. See, you can find a lot more information there also about the reforestation projects we run. You can search for Click a Tree on Instagram or Facebook or something and follow us there if you like, even though we're not as active on the social channels as maybe we should be. Of course, we're more focusing on real life stuff. So that is a good beginning. And then, of course, if anybody would like to, or if you go travel anywhere, you always just start your booking on badandtree.com. And it's as simple as a website. And there you have the, say, Expedia logo. You click on Expedia and then you place your link with Expedia. And that's all you do. It's just like a normal booking process. They get all your contact details and credit card details and everything. I don't want any of that. And then at the end of the time, they just get back to me and say, hey, Chris, you referred another client to us. Here's your marketing remuneration. And we invested into planting trees. So that is certainly the simplest ways you can help. On clickatree.com. You can also just click a tree. That's where the name comes from. Oh,
so simple. So you're just making it so simple for everybody.
That's the idea. Yeah. And then if you want to contribute further, just shoot me an email. Yeah, there's the contact form on the website. Say you want to start a reforestation project in your area, or you gastronomy, you want to join in with Food for Future, or you any sort of business and you're keen on planting trees, then just get in touch. And I'm sure we can develop a win-win scenario where we make it super simple for you to become more sustainable, but also for your clients to actually love your efforts. And by that, finding more clients, so you make more money by saving the planet. That's the end idea of it. So yeah, that's I recommend.
Oh, fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. Your story is very inspiring. I'm always interested to hear about how people are able to combine for-profit and not-for-profit, and what you're doing for the community, especially during this time, as you said, where we've lost tourism, and trying to, maybe this is the next way that we look into sustainable development. And like you said, look into that, you plant trees for a living, you're cool. So it was really inspiring. Thank you so much for coming on the show. And for everyone watching or listening, I'll put all the details in the description. Thanks again, Chris.
Thank you, Bianca. Thank you so much for taking the time. It was a big pleasure talking with you. And yeah, looking forward to continue the conversation down the road.
Plant more trees.
Yes.